The sterile, imposing silence of Federal Courtroom B hung heavy in the air, a palpable shroud draped over the proceedings, a suffocating blanket of anticipation that seemed to press down on every individual present, absorbing all sound and light, intensifying every breath, making the very act of existing within its confines a labored effort, a conscious struggle against the invisible weight of impending judgment. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed with an almost audible high-pitched intensity, a continuous irritating drone that grated on the nerves, drilling into the skull, amplifying every rustle of paper, every shifting foot, every whispered aside, casting a stark, unforgiving glow on every face, every polished surface of the courtroom, illuminating even the most minute imperfections and betraying every subtle shift in expression, every involuntary twitch. The air, typically thick with the subtle scent of old paper, polished wood, and stale coffee from forgotten cups, instead carried a faint, acrid undertone of fear and desperation, mingling inextricably with the heavy perfume of freshly starched suits worn by the legal teams and the subtle, cloying scent of nervous perspiration from the public gallery, a volatile cocktail of human anxiety and raw emotion, a silent testimony to the high stakes at play. At the defendant's table sat Alistair Finch, a man whose very name had once resonated with the promise of medical breakthroughs, the undeniable allure of scientific genius, and the very vanguard of hope for humanity's most dire ailments. He was known globally as the visionary, undeniably charismatic, and now undeniably notorious, CEO of Ascendant Pharma, a pharmaceutical giant whose brand had once been synonymous with life-saving innovations, boundless compassion, and the relentless pursuit of human well-being. Today, however, that shimmering facade of hope, meticulously constructed over decades with billions of dollars and sophisticated marketing, had curdled into a bitter, toxic despair for countless families across the nation. Their dreams shattered, their lives irrevocably altered by his actions, their collective grief, a silent scream echoing in the hallowed hall, demanding reckoning, demanding justice, demanding answers that only he, in his guarded silence, could provide. Finch, a man of 55 years, with a distinguished shock of prematurely silver hair meticulously swept back from a high forehead, revealing sharp, chiseled features that spoke of a ruthless self-discipline, a relentless drive, and eyes that, even in this grim, unforgiving setting, held a calculating, almost predatory glint, a coldness that seemed to pierce through the formal veneer of his public persona, betraying a deeper, unsettling ruthlessness that rarely surfaced in his carefully controlled public appearances. He wore a custom-tailored dark suit, likely a bespoke piece from a renowned Italian tailor in Milan, its expensive fabric clinging perfectly to his lean, athletic frame, a testament to his continued obsession with appearance and physical perfection even in the face of ruin, a defiant statement of his perceived superiority over the common masses. It was a last defiant vestige of the immense wealth, unquestioned power, and almost aristocratic privilege he had once wielded without a second thought. His personal uniform of invincibility, now ironically worn in a cage, a gilded prison from which there seemed no escape, a metaphor for his inescapable fate. He clutched a leather-bound legal pad, its corners worn smooth from years of use, its pages filled with frantic, indecipherable scribbles, a desperate, disorganized attempt to organize the chaos in his mind, to strategize a way out, to find a loophole in the labyrinth of the law, to invent a new defense, his knuckles white against the dark leather, a silent, almost involuntary testament to the churning, furious anxiety that seethed just beneath his impeccably composed, seemingly unshakable exterior. Every breath he took was shallow, every muscle taut, a coiled spring of suppressed fear and tightly controlled rage, threatening to unravel at any moment, to expose the raw panic within. Judge Judy Vance, her silver hair a formidable, almost regal crown against the dark, polished wood of the bench, its deep mahogany sheen reflecting the courtroom lights like dark water, settled into her high-backed leather chair with a soft creak that was barely audible in the hushed chamber, a sound almost swallowed by the oppressive silence, yet resonating with an unseen authority. Her movements were deliberate, precise, imbued with a quiet gravitas that demanded attention. She adjusted the folds of her black robe, a simple yet powerful gesture. Her presence alone, her sheer gravity, filled the room, commanding absolute attention, drawing all eyes to her, a beacon of unwavering authority. Her gaze, sharp, unwavering, and utterly devoid of pretense or false sentiment, swept slowly across the courtroom, a comprehensive analytical assessment of every face, every nervous fidget, every subtle shift in posture, every hint of deceit, every flicker of a lie. It lingered for a moment, deliberately, on the rows of anguished, grieving faces in the public gallery. The silent witnesses, the families, the former patients, the irrevocably altered victims of a betrayal so insidious, so cruel, so utterly devoid of human compassion that it defied easy comprehension, twisting the very notion of medical trust into a grotesque parody of its former self. Their collective sorrow was a palpable force in the room, a heavy, unseen cloud, a chilling testament to the destruction Finch wrought, a silent, damning indictment written on their weary faces, etched into their very souls. Then, her eyes, like twin lasers of truth and scrutiny, relentless in their pursuit, locked onto Alistair Finch, piercing through his carefully constructed facade of arrogance and benevolent leadership, stripping him bare, exposing the raw, desperate man beneath the polished exterior, the hollow core of his being, the chilling emptiness where conscience should have resided, a void he desperately tried to fill with lies. "Mr. Finch," her voice, clear, resonant, and carrying the full, unyielding weight of federal authority, sliced through the profound quiet like a sharp blade, each word precise and deliberate. "Your company, Ascendant Pharma, faces a multitude of federal charges, the severity of which cannot be overstated. Charges that strike at the very heart of public safety and medical ethics. These include, but are not limited to, felony fraud, reckless endangerment of the public, and multiple counts of involuntary manslaughter, all stemming directly from the widespread distribution of CogniGen, your much-touted Alzheimer's drug. Furthermore, you, personally, Alistair Finch, stand accused of perjury, obstruction of justice, and systematically manipulating scientific data on an unprecedented and horrifying scale. Do you understand the monumental gravity of these proceedings, sir? Do you fully grasp the chilling implications of what you stand accused of having done to so many innocent lives, to so many trusting families, to the very foundation of medical ethics, to the sacred bond between patient and healer, a bond you appear to have ruthlessly exploited for personal gain?" Her gaze bored into him, demanding a response beyond mere words, beyond mere performance, demanding true, unvarnished accountability. Finch, feeling the relentless, almost physical pressure from Judge Vance's unwavering gaze, a weight that seemed to crush the air from his lungs, adjusted his silk tie with a meticulous, almost obsessive gesture, a tiny, nervous habit that betrayed the violent inner turmoil he desperately tried to conceal, the facade of calm beginning to crack at the edges, fine lines appearing on the polished surface. He took a shallow breath, his lungs feeling constricted, as if the air itself was too heavy to draw in. He responded with a voice that, despite a barely perceptible tremor, maintained an almost theatrical calm, a chilling performance of serene self-assurance honed over years of high-stakes negotiations, hostile takeovers, and public appearances where his image was everything. He meticulously chose his words, as if each syllable were a precious commodity, a strategic move in a high-stakes game of chess, one he fully intended to win, even against seemingly insurmountable odds, even against the truth. "Yes, Your Honor, I do understand profoundly, and I assure this esteemed court, with every fiber of my being, with absolute sincerity that borders on reverence, that these are baseless, scandalous accusations, maliciously propagated by desperate, unscrupulous competitors who fear innovation and profoundly misguided activist groups seeking to undermine Ascendant Pharma's tireless, selfless efforts to combat devastating, incurable diseases that plague humanity. My sole aim, Your Honor, my unwavering mission, my life's calling, has always been to bring true healing and genuine hope to those who suffer from the most debilitating neurological conditions known to mankind. Our work is a calling, a noble pursuit, a philanthropic endeavor, a legacy built on compassion and scientific integrity, not merely a business venture solely focused on profit, as the prosecution falsely alleges with their inflammatory and sensationalist rhetoric. He spoke with the conviction of a man utterly convinced of his own inherent righteousness, of his own benevolent intent, a narrative he had rehearsed countless times in front of mirrors and private consultants until it felt like a part of his very being, an unassailable truth. His gaze was fixed on a point just beyond Judge Vance's shoulder, a subtle yet deliberate avoidance of direct eye contact that might betray his carefully crafted composure, a classic evasion that did not go unnoticed by the seasoned judge, who had seen it 1,000 times before in the eyes of the guilty, the deceptive. He projected an aura of a benevolent martyr, a victim of circumstance, a visionary under attack, not a villain, hoping to sway the perception of the courtroom, if not the judge herself. "Healing and hope, Mr. Finch," Judge Vance retorted, her tone sharp, precise, like a scalpel dissecting a malignant growth, cutting through the layers of his carefully constructed rhetoric, exposing the lies beneath. Her voice bore down on him, cutting through his carefully crafted words, revealing the hollowness beneath, the cynical manipulation that belied his every statement, every grand claim, every assertion of goodwill. "Our preliminary evidence, Mr. Finch, voluminous and meticulously collected over many months by dedicated federal agents and independent forensic teams, suggests that CogniGen, far from being a scientific breakthrough, far from offering solace or alleviation, instead caused severe, irreversible neurological damage, drastically accelerated cognitive decline, turning once sharp minds into empty vessels, reducing vibrant personalities to mere husks, and in dozens of documented, verified cases, directly led to the agonizing, prolonged deaths of patients who placed their complete, naive trust in your product, in your company's hollow promises. This isn't mere accusation, sir. These are detailed post-mortem reports, irrefutable neurological analyses performed by independent experts, conducted with the highest scientific integrity, and a growing, horrifying list of grieving families whose lives have been irrevocably shattered by your product. They are here, Mr. Finch, in this very room, bearing witness to your defense, enduring your performance, listening to every word you utter, hoping for an ounce of truth, a sliver of remorse, a moment of genuine human connection. Her voice rose slightly, emphasizing the immense human cost of his alleged actions. The faces in the gallery contorted with pain and suppressed rage, a silent, powerful echo of her words, their collective anguish a palpable force, a damning presence in the solemn courtroom, a stark, visceral reminder of the lives he had so carelessly discarded in his relentless, selfish pursuit of profit, of power, of a flawed legacy. Finch sighed, a deliberate, theatrical performance of weary, almost saintly indignation, as if burdened by the very weight of such profoundly unfair accusations, a man deeply misunderstood, a victim of circumstance, not a perpetrator. He clasped his hands on the legal pad, his fingers still white-knuckled, a tension that belied his calm facade, a small tremor running through his arm, barely visible but undeniably present. Your Honor, drug development, by its very nature, is an inherently complex, perilous, and profoundly uncertain endeavor. carrying inherent, unavoidable risks. Clinical trials, by their very definition, are designed to reveal varying patient responses, to identify the subtle nuances of human biology, the unexpected sensitivities of individual systems, the unforeseen biochemical interactions that no scientist, no matter how brilliant, how dedicated, can fully predict. While we at Ascendant Pharma deeply mourn any adverse outcomes, and my heart genuinely goes out to every suffering patient and their family, to their unimaginable loss, these were, I assure you, unforeseen, idiosyncratic reactions unique to individual patients, not systemic failures in our research or development. Ascendant Pharma followed every single protocol, every regulation, every letter of the law, every FDA guideline, every ethical standard laid out by the international scientific community. The FDA approved CogniGen, after all, only after their own exhaustive, rigorous review process, their own independent assessments, their own thorough investigations, spanning years of painstaking work. We relied on their judgment, their expertise, their thoroughness, as any responsible pharmaceutical company would in bringing a potentially life-changing drug to market, especially one aimed at such a devastating disease. To suggest otherwise is to malign the entire pharmaceutical industry, to undermine public faith in medical science itself, to jeopardize future breakthroughs that could truly save millions of lives, to condemn innovation. His voice, though still calm, now carried the heavy weight of a man seemingly burdened by an immense, unforeseen tragedy, rather than by his own profound, calculated guilt, a master of deflection and evasiveness, attempting to shift the blame to the complexities of science and regulatory bodies, painting himself as a noble, beleaguered scientist, a martyr to progress. "Rigorous review, you say?" Judge Vance leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, piercing his carefully constructed narrative, dissecting his every word, leaving no ambiguity, no room for his carefully crafted half-truths. Her gaze held him, unblinking, unwavering, demanding the unvarnished truth, demanding an admission that transcended his legalistic evasions. "We have the sworn testimony of Dr. Evelyn Reed, Ascendant Pharma's former head of clinical trials, a respected scientist with a career spanning decades, a woman known for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering ethical standards, whose professional reputation is beyond reproach, a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward, putting her entire life on the line." Dr. Reed states, under oath and under immense personal duress, having faced threats to her own safety and the safety of her loved ones, that you personally ordered her to manipulate crucial clinical trial data, specifically commanding her to systematically suppress reports of severe adverse events, the sudden, unexplained seizures, the rapid, terrifying memory loss that turned loved ones into strangers overnight, the inexplicable paralysis, the profound disorientation, the agonizing pain, the complete loss of self, the final moments of lucidity, and to brazenly fabricate positive outcomes in order to rush CogniGen to market before adequate safety measures were in place, before the true devastating dangers were widely known to the public and the medical community. She claims you explicitly threatened her career, her long-earned pension, her professional reputation, her very livelihood, and even her elderly parents' safety if she refused to comply with your illegal and unethical directives. What, Mr. Finch, is your precise response to Dr. Reed's grave, detailed, and deeply disturbing testimony? Are you truly calling a decorated, esteemed scientist and a woman of profound moral courage a liar, sir? Are you suggesting she, too, is part of this elaborate smear campaign orchestrated against your benevolent company, or perhaps a pawn in the hands of desperate competitors attempting to frame you, the virtuous CEO? Judge Vance's voice was now laced with a simmering indignation, her patience wearing dangerously thin, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass, demanding an honest answer, a shred of accountability from the unyielding CEO, a man who seemed impervious to shame. Finch's face tightened, a subtle clenching of his jaw and a flicker of anger in his eyes, but he quickly composed himself, drawing on years of practice in high-pressure situations, in boardrooms where he held absolute sway, where his word was law, adopting an air of profound disappointment, even pity, for his former employees' alleged instability. He meticulously articulated his response, as if delivering a eulogy for a lost cause, a carefully worded statement designed for public consumption, for the endless news cycle, not for the judge's ears alone, a final attempt to control the narrative outside the courtroom. Dr. Reed, a truly unfortunate situation, Your Honor. Dr. Reed has, regrettably, been struggling with severe professional burnout and escalating personal financial difficulties for quite some time, long before these baseless allegations arose. Her judgment became demonstrably impaired, leading to significant errors in her work, a noticeable decline in her professional capabilities and ethical compass. She was, in fact, terminated due to gross incompetence and severe ethical lapses entirely unrelated to CogniGen's development or its clinical data integrity. Infractions that we discovered during a rigorous, thorough internal review process initiated by the board after multiple complaints from other staff members regarding her erratic behavior and poor judgment. I believe her testimony is nothing more than a vindictive fabrication, a desperate last-ditch attempt to deflect blame from her own manifest failures and to maliciously damage Ascendant Pharma's impeccable reputation out of sheer spite and resentment for her well-deserved termination. He shook his head slowly, a carefully practiced gesture, portraying himself as a sorrowful, benevolent employer tragically betrayed by a disgruntled, unstable former subordinate, a victim of circumstance, not an aggressor. His voice carried a tone of aggrieved righteousness, an attempt to solidify his position as the wronged party, the true victim in this elaborate conspiracy. Incompetence and ethical lapses, Mr. Finch? Judge Vance countered, her voice now dangerously low, each word a hammer blow, cold and precise, designed to chip away at his carefully constructed edifice of lies, to expose the rotting core within, to shatter his meticulously crafted self-image. Dr. Reed's personnel file, submitted to this court by your own company, Mr. Finch, unequivocally shows a 20-year career of exemplary service, numerous commendations for her scientific rigor, her meticulous attention to detail, and a spotless professional record until her direct involvement with CogniGen. Her recent financial difficulties, as she testified under oath, began after her termination, which she unequivocally states was direct retaliation for her unwavering refusal to falsify critical, life-altering patient data. Furthermore, we have meticulously recovered encrypted emails from your personal account, sent directly to Dr. Reed, explicitly discussing adjustments to patient data that defy all known scientific methodology and explicitly threatening unpleasant consequences if she did not comply with your directives. These emails are not out of context, Mr. Finch. They are direct, irrefutable evidence of your intent, of your clear culpability, of your ruthless disregard for scientific integrity. How precisely do you explain these damning emails, sir? Are they also part of Dr. Reed's alleged delusions, or perhaps the work of another misguided activist attempting to frame you, the virtuous CEO, for crimes you vehemently deny? Judge Vance's voice was now laced with a simmering indignation, her patience wearing dangerously thin, her gaze sharp enough to cut glass, demanding an honest answer, a shred of accountability from the unyielding CEO, a man who seemed impervious to shame, impervious to truth, utterly disconnected from the human cost of his actions. Finch's composure wavered. A fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated panic flashed in his eyes, a desperate flicker of fear, but he swiftly recovered, forcing a strained smile, a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative, to regain his footing on the slippery slope of his lies, which were now piling up into an unstable mountain. He knew he was losing ground rapidly, the evidence against him mounting, the walls closing in. But he would not yield, not yet. Not until his very last breath. not until he was physically unable to speak, to defend himself. Your Honor, those emails are taken entirely out of context. Adjustments referred to standard, widely accepted statistical methodologies for data analysis, routine in large-scale clinical trials where minor anomalies can occur and need to be statistically normalized to ensure data integrity and avoid statistical noise, practices approved by leading biostatisticians and routinely employed throughout the industry, often under intense scrutiny from regulatory bodies, and unpleasant consequences referred to the very real possibility of Dr. Reed facing severe disciplinary action and even termination for her increasing negligence, her flagrant disregard for critical project deadlines, and the unacceptable delays she was causing in our critical, time-sensitive research to bring a vital, potentially revolutionary drug to market, a drug that held so much promise for so many, a beacon of hope in a dark world plagued by this terrible disease. My intent, Your Honor, was simply to urge efficiency, to maintain project timelines for a drug designed to save lives, to alleviate immense suffering, not to coerce or threaten. My communication style can sometimes be direct, blunt, even demanding, given the incredibly high stakes of our work, the immense urgency of finding cures for terrible diseases like Alzheimer's, where every day counts for patients and their families, where lives hang in the balance, a matter of life and death, not merely profit margins, Your Honor, but the profound human cost of delay. The ethical responsibility to act swiftly was paramount. He offered a strained, almost apologetic smile, a desperate, transparent plea for understanding, for the court to view him as a demanding but ultimately well-intentioned leader, sacrificing personal comfort for scientific progress and the greater good of humanity, a visionary under relentless, unfair pressure, struggling against unseen forces that sought to hinder his noble quest. His words, though increasingly desperate, flowed with a practiced rhythm, the rhythm of a man who had perfected the art of persuasion and deceit. Direct indeed, Judge Vance dryly remarked, her lips thinning into a grim line, utterly unconvinced by his flimsy, desperate excuses. Her gaze was steely, unblinking, unwavering, her posture unyielding, a picture of absolute conviction that left no room for doubt. Now let us turn to another deeply disturbing aspect of this case, Mr. Finch, one that speaks directly to your alleged intentions and your profound moral bankruptcy. A pattern of behavior that goes far beyond mere direct communication or standard statistical adjustments, and delves into criminal enterprise, into the heart of calculated deception and systematic exploitation. Federal investigators, with the tireless work of countless experts, including financial analysts, cyber forensics specialists, and international legal teams, have uncovered a complex, opaque series of shell corporations and obscure offshore accounts linked directly to you, through which a staggering amount of capital has flowed, over $1 billion in the last 2 years alone. The source of these immense funds is highly suspicious, completely untraceable through legitimate financial means, defying all logic and conventional auditing practices, raising red flags at every turn, indicating a deliberate effort to conceal. And we have compelling, irrefutable evidence suggesting these accounts were systematically used to funnel illicit profits from a closely guarded secret, an ineffective antidote to CogniGen's devastating side effects. A cure you not only patented under a different, undisclosed entity, deliberately obscuring its true ownership, but then shamelessly marketed and sold to desperate, vulnerable patients and their families, knowing full well it did nothing but provide false hope and extract further exorbitant payments from their agonizing suffering. How do you explain this elaborate, secretive financial network, Mr. Finch? Are these also standard statistical adjustments? Or perhaps another misunderstanding that just coincidentally yielded massive personal profit, Mr. Finch, while countless lives were being destroyed, while families were being driven into financial ruin and emotional despair, losing everything they held dear, all their hopes and dreams? Finch's face blanched, the color draining visibly from his cheeks, leaving him a sickly gray, a stark contrast to his silver hair. But he clung to his composure with an almost visible, desperate effort, his eyes darting frantically around the room, avoiding Judge Vance's piercing gaze, searching for an escape, for a new lie, for any lifeline to cling to, for a shred of a possibility, a desperate dying hope in a rapidly closing trap. His breath caught in his throat, a dry, painful constriction that made speaking difficult, almost impossible. Your Honor, the antidote in question, Restore a Mind, was an exploratory treatment, a compassionate offering, a desperate hope provided to patients experiencing unforeseen, severe adverse reactions to CogniGen. It was not a secret. It was a proprietary research compound under ongoing confidential investigation, pending further clinical trials and regulatory approval, a delicate scientific endeavor, the results of which we were eager to share with the world, to contribute to the global medical community, to bring new healing. Its efficacy was, regrettably, inconclusive at the time, yes, but its intent was always therapeutic, never exploitative. It was a sincere humanitarian attempt to alleviate suffering, born of genuine concern for our patients' well-being, to offer them a ray of hope when traditional treatments failed, when they had nowhere else to turn, when they faced the abyss of disease, when all other options were exhausted. The funds you speak of are the result of entirely legal, complex international investments, meticulously managed and wholly unrelated to Restore a Mind or CogniGen's sales whatsoever. Ascendant Pharma operates in vast global markets, Your Honor, and such sophisticated financial structures are common and entirely legitimate for optimal tax optimization and robust risk management strategies, essential for a company of our scale, operating in a highly competitive global pharmaceutical landscape where every penny counts, where efficiency is paramount, where the cost of drug development is astronomical, where every dollar must be accounted for and every resource leveraged efficiently. His voice, though still attempting to project authority and control, was now tinged with a desperate, almost frantic defensiveness, his words rushing out in a torrent, a cascade of desperate, hollow lies, each one adding to the weight of his growing deceit, each one digging him deeper into the hole he had dug for himself, burying him under a mountain of his own making. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, his hand trembling slightly, his polished image slowly, irrevocably, fracturing under the relentless pressure of the truth, revealing the desperate cornered man beneath the facade. Common for tax optimization, or common for systematic money laundering and concealing illicit gains derived directly from human suffering, Mr. Finch? Judge Vance challenged, her voice piercing through his denials like a laser, leaving no room for equivocation, no quarter given, no possibility of escape from her relentless scrutiny, her unwavering pursuit of justice, her absolute commitment to truth. We have the damning testimony from Mr. Samuel Roth, a former senior accountant at Ascendant Pharma, a man who knows your financial dealings inside and out, a man of conscience who risked everything, his career, his safety, his family's well-being, to speak the truth, to reveal your crimes, to bring light to your dark dealings. Mr. Roth, in exchange for federal protection due to the severe threats he received against his life and his family, has provided detailed ledgers, encrypted communications, and explicit written instructions directly from you, ordering the systematic siphoning of illicit profits from both CogniGen and Restore a Mind into these very offshore accounts. He states that you personally oversaw the meticulous creation of dozens of shell companies specifically designed to hide these illegal transactions from auditors, regulators, and the tax authorities. He also testified under oath that you personally threatened his family, specifically his elderly, ailing parents, if he dared to speak to authorities, if he dared to expose your vast network of corruption, your intricate web of deceit. Do you deny these direct, terrifying threats, Mr. Finch? Or is Mr. Roth also part of this grand smear campaign against your character? A mere disgruntled employee seeking revenge, as you so conveniently claim, without a shred of evidence, without any corroboration. Finch recoiled, his jaw clenching so hard that a muscle twitched visibly in his cheek, his composure finally beginning to shatter, his mask of arrogance cracking irrevocably, revealing the raw, exposed nerves beneath. He looked utterly aghast, as if personally insulted by the very notion of his integrity being questioned, as if Judge Vance had physically struck him across the face, shattering his pride, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The pretense of calm was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a visible seething rage that warred with his terror, a desperate battle for control of his rapidly diminishing composure, a losing fight he was destined to lose. Samuel Roth is a disgruntled, opportunistic, and entirely unreliable employee, Your Honor. He was caught attempting to embezzle massive company funds, systematically stealing millions from Ascendant Pharma, a gross violation of trust, and this entire charade, this monstrous fabrication, is his desperate, cowardly attempt to escape justice for his own severe crimes. His claims about my involvement, about threats, these are malicious fabrications born of pure desperation and a vengeful desire for retribution after being caught red-handed. He's a thief and a liar, seeking to drag me down with him, to destroy my reputation and my company. I am a man of unimpeachable integrity, Your Honor. I would never, ever threaten an innocent family. My own children. He trailed off, his voice cracking, his composure failing, the words catching in his throat, choked by his own fear and anger, unable to complete his desperate narrative of self-righteousness, his carefully constructed self-image collapsing. His eyes darted around, searching frantically for a sympathetic face, finding none, only cold, accusing stares. Your children are not on trial here, Mr. Finch, Judge Vance interrupted sharply, her voice cutting off his transparent appeal to sentiment, his desperate attempt to evoke pity, her patience gone, replaced by a steely resolve that radiated from her, cold and unwavering, an unyielding force of justice. Mr. Roth has provided concrete, corroborated evidence that aligns perfectly with our own independent forensic audits of Ascendant Pharma's financials, audits that expose a staggering, undeniable pattern of sophisticated fraud. And his family has indeed been placed under federal protection following credible, verified threats that originated from individuals directly linked to your offshore accounts, individuals who worked for you, Mr. Finch, under your explicit direction, carrying out your illicit orders. The veracity of his testimony is not in doubt, Mr. Finch. It stands as stark, undeniable truth, a beacon in the darkness of your deceit, illuminating your path of destruction, exposing every hidden corner of your criminality. Now, let's address the victims, Mr. Finch. Dozens of families lost loved ones, agonizingly, tragically, believing with all their hearts in CogniGen's false promise, clinging desperately to hope even as their loved ones wasted away, their minds deteriorating, their bodies failing, their very identities eroding before their eyes, reduced to shadows of their former selves, suffering unimaginable torment and despair. Many more spent their entire life savings, every last penny, every cherished inheritance, every retirement fund, every last resource, on Restore a Mind, desperately hoping for a miracle cure you knew, absolutely knew, would never come. A miracle you deliberately withheld while lining your own pockets, profiting from their pain, from their desperate pleas, from their last gasps of hope. Their trust was not just violated, Mr. Finch, it was poisoned, utterly destroyed, their faith in medicine shattered, leaving them with nothing but grief, financial ruin, and the bitter, searing taste of betrayal. Are you prepared to face the families of Sarah Peterson, Thomas Miller, Eleanor Vance, and countless others who are in this very courtroom today, listening to your pathetic lies, watching your desperate performance? enduring your contempt with remarkable dignity and silent suffering, longing for true justice and closure. Finch's eyes darted frantically towards the public gallery, a flicker of genuine, raw fear passing over his face as he met the stony, unforgiving gazes of the bereaved. Their eyes, filled with an incandescent rage, profound sorrow, and a righteous demand for justice, seemed to burn into his very soul, a silent condemnation, a chorus of silent accusations echoing in his mind, a deafening roar that drowned out all other thoughts, all his carefully rehearsed lines, all his desperate attempts at self-preservation, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He quickly looked away, clearing his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of his shattered control, to regain his composure, to collect his thoughts, to find another escape route, another lie, another deflection. But his mind was drawing blanks. His usual cunning abandoned him, leaving him adrift in a sea of his own making. Your Honor, my heart genuinely goes out to every patient and their family. Their suffering is not, and never has been, something I take lightly. But Ascendant Pharma truly believed in CogniGen. We acted in good faith, based on the best scientific understanding available at the time. Any tragic outcomes were the direct result of deliberate, calculated fraud, Mr. Finch. Judge Vance finished for him, her voice cold, unyielding, a final, definitive judgment ringing through the silent courtroom, leaving no room for argument, no space for denial. Her words carried the weight of absolute certainty, unshakable truth, an undeniable force of nature. You knowingly risked human lives, systematically destroyed hope, and callously profited from unimaginable suffering. The evidence against you, Mr. Finch, is overwhelming, irrefutable, and damning beyond any reasonable doubt. Your explanations are riddled with inconsistencies, blatant falsehoods, and pathetic, transparent attempts to shift blame onto others, onto anyone but yourself. This court has heard enough of your self-serving theatrics, enough of your contemptible lies. There comes a point, Mr. Finch, where the truth can no longer be twisted, no longer be bought, and no longer be buried beneath a mountain of lies, no matter how vast your wealth, no matter how influential your connections, no matter how polished your public image. And you, sir, have unequivocally reached that point. Your time for deception, for manipulation, is definitively over. Your moral ledger is balanced, and the truth stands revealed for all to see, undeniable and devastating. Finch's face, which had maintained an almost impenetrable mask of control, of arrogant composure, throughout the lengthy, grueling proceedings, finally began to crack, visibly and irrevocably, like a crumbling statue, revealing the true terror beneath, the abject fear of a man finally cornered, stripped of all his defenses, his hubris shattered into a million pieces. A bead of cold sweat trickled down his temple, glistening ominously under the harsh lights, a stark symbol of his unraveling, his absolute loss of control. He looked at Judge Vance, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief, then at the silent, expectant faces in the courtroom, their gazes like piercing arrows, their collective weight of judgment a physical, crushing burden that pressed down on him, suffocating him, stealing his breath, making his lungs ache, his chest tight with a desperate, animalistic terror. His breath hitched, a desperate, shallow gasp, a pathetic sound in the solemn room, the last vestiges of his bravado draining away, leaving him a trembling wreck, utterly helpless. He had always been in control, always the orchestrator, the puppet master pulling the strings of his vast empire, dictating terms, manipulating outcomes, crushing dissent, silencing opposition. Now he was merely a puppet, his strings being cut, one by one, by the relentless, unyielding hand of justice, leaving him limp, powerless, and utterly exposed. The illusion of his invincibility had shattered, irrevocably, leaving him naked before the world, a hollow shell of his former self, devoid of all former glory. "Your Honor," he began, his voice barely a whisper, a desperate final plea for leniency, for a lifeline, a desperate hope for a way out, any way out of this tightening noose. His voice was hoarse, raw with terror, tinged with a self-pity that was almost sickening, a final pathetic attempt to gain sympathy from the unmovable force before him, from the cold eyes of justice. I admit that certain pressures, immense pressures to deliver on promises to investors, to satisfy demanding shareholders, to compete in a cutthroat global market, to save lives, to fulfill the grand, world-changing promise of Ascendant Pharma, led to decisions that, in retrospect, may have been misguided. I deeply regret any unforeseen consequences, any unintended harm. My conscience weighs heavily upon me, Your Honor, more than words can express. I am prepared to offer significant compensation to the affected families, a substantial fund, millions, billions if necessary. I can cooperate fully with the authorities, provide names, details of financial networks, anything. Just, please, Your Honor, don't destroy everything. Don't take away my life's work. Don't ruin the company that has done so much good for humanity, that still has the potential to do so much more, to find real cures for real diseases. I can help you dismantle the very systems that forced my hand, that created this impossible situation, that drove me to these desperate acts, that truly corrupted me." His carefully constructed image of an unyielding titan crumbled completely, dissolving into that of a pleading, terrified, utterly broken man, pathetic in his desperation, his true, cowardly self finally revealed to the world, begging for mercy, for a shred of his former life, a chance at redemption he did not deserve. He looked small, insignificant, pathetic, a shadow of his former self. Judge Vance stared at him, her expression unreadable, a stone statue of justice, unswayed by his last-ditch, self-serving plea for mercy. Her gaze was unflinching, her resolve unbreakable, her decision already made, carved in immutable stone, beyond appeal, beyond negotiation. "Mr. Finch, your offer of cooperation now, after systematically lying under oath, tampering with crucial evidence, explicitly threatening witnesses and causing untold, profound suffering to countless innocent individuals, rings hollow. It is not an act of genuine contrition, a true change of heart, a sincere apology for your monstrous actions, but a desperate, transparent maneuver to escape the full deserved consequences of your heinous crimes. This court finds your actions to be a grave betrayal of public trust, a monstrous abuse of corporate power, and an unforgivable affront to human decency, a stain on the very fabric of science and ethics that you claim to uphold, a desecration of the trust placed in medical professionals who truly seek to heal. Your belated offer of cooperation does not absolve you of your responsibility, nor does it excuse the suffering you have inflicted. It merely highlights the depth of your self-interest, even in your final moments of freedom, even as your world collapses around you, even as the truth finally ensnares you, leaving you with no escape." She paused, allowing her damning words to sink in. The silence in the courtroom absolute, suffocating, pregnant with anticipation, broken only by the muffled sobs from the gallery, growing louder now, anticipating the final judgment, the long-awaited closure that had eluded them for so long. Then, her voice rose, resonating with a solemn, final authority that filled every corner of the room, leaving no room for doubt, no opportunity for appeal, no hope for a different outcome, no escape from the inevitable. The court finds you guilty on all counts. The sheer, horrifying scale of your deception, the cold, calculated disregard for human life, and your repeated, cynical attempts to pervert the course of justice leave this court with absolutely no alternative. Alistair Finch, You are hereby remanded into federal custody without bail, pending your formal sentencing. You will await your fate in a cell, Mr. Finch, stripped of all your power and privilege, utterly alone, with nothing but the truth and your conscience for company. A conscience that you have long suppressed, a truth that will now haunt your every waking moment, your every tortured dream. Let this case stand as a stark, indelible reminder to all that the relentless, often intoxicating pursuit of profit, no matter how vast, no matter how alluring, can never, ever outweigh the sacred sanctity of human life, and that even the most powerful among us, those who believe themselves untouchable, immune to consequence, are ultimately not beyond the reach of justice. The law, Mr. Finch, applies equally to all, from the most humble citizen to the most powerful CEO, without exception, without bias, without compromise. The scales of justice have balanced, Mr. Finch, and your weight has been found wanting, revealed to be empty and corrupt, a hollow man behind a golden facade, his empire built on sand, destined to crumble. The gavel fell, a sharp, resounding crack that reverberated through the stunned courtroom, echoing in the hearts of the victims' families, a sound that finally brought them a measure of peace, of vindication, sealing Alistair Finch's fate with an inescapable finality. He stood motionless, a hollow shell of his former self, his face now completely devoid of color, pale as parchment, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, utter horror, and a dawning terrible understanding of the abyss he had fallen into, an abyss from which there was no return, no escape, no redemption. The golden cage, built meticulously from the immense wealth and unchecked power he had so ruthlessly amassed, had finally, irrevocably, closed around him, its bars forged by his own lies, his own greed, and the devastating, irreversible consequences of his unchecked ambition. As federal marshals moved in to take him into custody, their presence a grim, undeniable reality. He could hear the faint, muffled sounds of sobs and shouts of justice from the public gallery, a mournful chorus mixed with cries of triumph, a final symphony to his downfall, a tragic opera of his own making, played out for all the world to see, a stark warning. But it was Judge Vance's unwavering gaze, cold and unforgiving, yet strangely peaceful in its resolute determination, that truly locked him into his new, permanent reality. He had played a dangerous, callous game, manipulating lives, hopes, and dreams, as if they were mere data points on a spreadsheet, expendable pawns in his pursuit of profit, in his grand scheme of dominance. He had treated human beings as mere variables in his equations of power and wealth, their suffering a negligible cost, a statistic to be managed. And now, at long last, the game was definitively over. The judge had spoken, and in the silent, chilling aftermath, the echo of that gavel felt like the final, definitive heartbeat of his ruined, shattered life, signaling the end of his golden reign and the grim beginning of his eternal confinement. The walls of his self-made prison closed in around him, a monument to his monumental hubris, a testament to the fact that true justice, though sometimes slow, is ultimately inescapable, a force of nature that bends even the mightiest to its will, breaking them on the anvil of truth. The story of Alistair Finch would serve as a chilling warning, etched into the annals of corporate malfeasance, a testament to the insatiable appetite of greed and the unyielding power of the law, a tale whispered in boardrooms for generations to come, a dark legend of ambition undone by its own monstrous creations. The courtroom, once his stage, became his tomb,